Two triangles. So the triangle going down, that's the future, and triangle going up is the past. And that's actually fitting the picture. Now, 10 years ago, nobody would have said this. Because 10 years ago, we didn't have the information. This is pretty new. Okay. And, here's Teilhard de Chardin, his mega point. He's, eventually maybe when the Vatican, they have this astronomy thing, but they have a bunch of jerks going there. I mean, not saying anything. So eventually, maybe they'll realize that, because Teilhard de Chardin is still kind of excommunicated. So I mean, he's kind of, they excommunicated this guy at one point.
It hasn't reached them yet. They're farther.
It hasn't reached them yet. And and then there was this is kind of interesting. And look at this. Okay, there's this guy when Fred Alan Wolfe and I and a guy named Bob Tobin in 1973 were on these strange adventures in Europe, and we introduced this 84-year-old man, Carlos Suarez. This back, and he was this Kabbalist, and he lived in this apartment on the Champ de Mars, right by the Eiffel Tower. And close to, he was Sartre. He's part of Jean-Paul Sartre and Agnès Nin, and all, that he was part of that whole thing in the 20s and the 30s. In any case, for some very strange coincidence, we got to know him, and Fred Wolfe and I, we were in our 30s, and so we would go to his house, and he was like giving us Hebrew lessons, Kabbalah. He was trying to teach us the Kabbalah. He's a Kabbalist, and he would say things, and Fred sort of was more interested. I was, not that interested in it, but he said one of the things you would do. He said you're going to smash the wall of light. He's looking for the physicists. He says the Genesis in the Bible, the Old Testament, is really a code for the creation of the universe. That it's like the Rosetta Stone, and the physicists are going to have to decode it. It says theologians, they don't know anything. Philosophers, they don't. But he wanted to meet physicists. He met David Bohm, and then he would meet Fred, and Fred and I was pretty crazy. He was smoking grass back in Paris, and he was like 1973, and having a great time. And and at one point one day I'm up there, and I'm sort of like dozing off, not paying attention. It's like, and he was a little bit. It's like Yoda in Star Wars. He's like Yoda. Really, I mean, he even looked at it like it's sort of like Maurice. And he grabs him by the shoulders, and he looks at me, and he says, "You don't know it yet. You don't know it. You will not come into your power until you're with the woman and the child." And
you're still contemplating that one.
No, that's Tina and Andrew. Yeah. Tina and Andrew. She's Sephardic too. So now it turns out, he was very close to Lawrence Durrell, and he is, if you read the Alexandria Quartet, he is the character Balthazar is partly based on the books is Justine, Cleo. What are the Balthazar? And Mount Olive. Okay, so the character. Now it turns out all these guys were spies in World War II. See, if you read, they were all. Lawrence Durrell was in the British intelligence, was like the equivalent of MI6, right? It was very, and Carlos was actually in Paris when the Nazis were there, and for some, he was Jewish, from Alexandria, Egypt, just like that. For some reason, So all these guys were all involved in the intelligence in World War II, and then at one point I'm in Cambridge University in 1974 after sort of seeing Carlo, and I'm at this Cambridge University, this meeting of the Psychic Research Society of Cambridge. When I first met Brian Josephson, it was another crazy. He's Nobel Prize physicist into all this kind of weird stuff. And there was a guy there named Dennis Bardens, and Dennis Bardens at that time must have been, I guess, 70 years old, and very distinguished. He's like the official biographer of Winston Churchill, okay? But he's also was he created Panorama in BBC, and during World War, you read about him in Google him, you see he was in Czechoslovakia, and I mean he's British intelligence too, okay? And he looks like M or something from right out of a James Bond movie, the old guy who's trying. And so we're at this meeting, and he walks up to me and he says, "Dr. Sarfatti, may I take you to dinner?" And he's very distinguished. He looked like Winston Churchill. I mean that type of very distinguished older gentleman. And Fred Wolf kind of met him. Fred Wolf said, "Yeah, go with him." So he took me to the Blue Boar Inn in Cambridge. And we had this nice dinner. I remember duck and cherry sauce and all that stuff. And I still remember the dinner. And then we go to the club, the gentleman's club, right? And it's people smoking and the wood fire and the mahogany and all this kind of deep leather seats. And we're sitting there, and he pulls out a cigar and we're having brandy and cigars, and he looks at me and he says, and he winks. He does this little impish, devilish thing. He says, "First of all, Dr. Sarfatti, you should know that I'm a Kabbalist." With all the secret society stuff, right? I'm a Kabbalist. And he winks because obviously he knew Durrell and he knew Carlo. I just come, with Paris, right? Then he gets serious. This is a great scene because we're going to do a movie, I think. And he says, "Dr. Sarfatti," gets very serious. He says, "My duty to inform you of a psychic war raging across the continents between the Soviet Union and your country, and you ought to be in the thick of it." This is okay. And that's exactly what happened. It was already happening, of course. See, I didn't know that the Central Intelligence Agency was, they're the ones who were paying for my trip and everything. I mean, they were SRI. I didn't know. We were academics. Fred and I were, they don't tell you these things. But this is all, I found out later, of course. And then soon after I met Werner Erhard. I don't know if any of you all remember Werner Erhard. And there was all kinds of adventures and stuff like that. But all been going on. Consciousness. Okay, so consciousness. Okay. Okay. What quantum mechanics does
much
not
more
allow.
interesting than the nature of consciousness.
Okay. All right. Okay. There's a model. David Bohm. There's this guy David Bohm, who I worked with at the University of London in the 70s, and he was, he had worked with Einstein actually, and with Oppenheimer at Berkeley, and then he left the country because he covered up. He actually took the fall. Oppenheimer was a communist, and I guess David was a communist too. And there was some deal. I mean, he took the fall. He kind of protected Oppenheimer and said, no. So he escaped. Actually, Einstein helped Bohm leave Princeton to go to Brazil. On a boat, on a freighter. Okay. And then actually Richard Feynman. But there's a whole interesting story. But in any case, Bohm wound up. He was in Israel for a while, then he wound up a professor at the University of London. Okay, Bohm, he got into consciousness, Implican Order, he hung out with Krishnamurti and a bunch of visionaries, the artists and stuff like that. So, very smart guy. And he has this theory of quantum mechanics, in which basically, I'm going to simplify it, it's what's called the quantum potential. Basically, it's a mental information field, okay? And you have matter, what are called the hidden variables. And what happens is, in quantum theory, this quantum potential, think of it as a mind field, if you want, like a physical mind field. Mind, and not M-I-N-E, but M-I-N-D, like a mental field in a certain sense. And what it does, it influences the motion of material particles. Okay? In addition to forces. So it's like a quantum, it's not really, it has very strange, all the quantum weirdness, all the stuff that's weird about quantum mechanics is in these non-local properties of the quantum potential, and also what's called context-dependent. If you read a book called The Undivided Universe by David Bohm and Basil Hiley, well, that's a technical book. You can get it, that's, if you know some basic physics, you can get the details there, but there's some popular books he writes, about the implicate order, I forget what it's called, quantum implications. There are some popular works. And he had some books with Krishnamurti even, I think. Dialogues with Krishnamurti. So, okay. So the point is that it's like you have action without reaction. In other words, this mental field controls the motion of particles, but it does it in a random way. It's called uncontrollable quantum randomness. And that leads to things like the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. Because there's no direct feedback, no what's called back reaction of the particles back on their quantum potential. So it's like you have action of mind on matter without any reaction of matter back on mind. And that's a certain approximation in the mathematics. And it turns out, in that approximation, all the the theories of physics work. I mean, what physicists do, you know, they bang particles into each other, collisions. It's called scattering. The Large Hadron Collider now, the $6 billion, $7 billion machine in CERN, but basically it's accelerating particles at very high energy and bouncing it against the target. Okay, and for those kinds, there's no life there. I mean, it's dead stuff. Okay, and for those kinds of experiments, quantum mechanics works. Okay, but it's missing something. Okay, it doesn't work for living. I mean, that'll give you right there. It doesn't work for living systems. It's like Henri Bergson's Elan Vital. You know, and it's called signal non-locality. And technically, you know, it's a mathematical thing. You can formulate it. And what it is, the way to picture it, it's just like Newton's third law, action and reaction. When you have a direct reaction of the material back on the mental field, that excites qualia, that excites consciousness. Because look, I mean, what happens? We have our sensory stuff, right? We have light, signals, sound, everything coming in. We have these sensory transducers on nerves, and goes down to what we call microtubules, and then there's these called dimers, and electrons, and little computer switches. You've got to read Roger Penrose and Stuart Hameroff. You know, they have this picture. We're like nanocomputers. We are computers on a nanometer scale, billionth of a meter scale. Okay, we're machines. We're actually, and I mean, molecular biology is all machinery. I mean, we have, you know, it's basically machinery, but it's at the level where quantum physics begin to play a role. In fact, we just found out that there's what's called quantum entanglement is actually playing a role in the stability of DNA molecules and the RNA and that whole, you know, whole genetic code thing involves quantum mechanics.
And the DNA is quantum.
What?
The DNA is quantum. Well,
I mean, there are classical parts and there are also quantum, but the quantum mechanical parts are, people beginning to realize that it's more, you know, that's essential. You have to have these quantum mechanical
but
effects.
How can there be no reaction?
Well, the point is, but here's the thing. What happens is, because it turns out that the hidden variables are what are called, they're in thermal equilibrium. And in thermal equilibrium, maximum entropy, that's when that approximation works. But we are not thermal equilibrium. We are, you know, we are what are called open, dissipative structures. You know, we're consuming energy all the time, the metabolism, and so we are being held far from thermodynamic equilibrium. And when that happens, and you need something else called macro-quantum coherence. I mean, there's too many concepts to get the short. I've got to finish it now. But there are these other conditions, what are called non-equilibrium conditions, where this action-reaction, signal non-locality thing should work, and that's us. That's us. Because, in other words, when it's no longer uncontrollable random, in other words, information patterns, coherent patterns, sensory patterns, those are the motions of the material particles, but they are those motions being coherently imprinted back on the mind field and changing it in a coherent way, and it's that change. I mean, it's like you know, it's like a voltage difference. I mean, you know, it's that change. That's our consciousness. That's what's happening right now. That's what we are. I mean, in any case, there's a picture. It's kind of qualitative picture, semi-quantitative picture.
How about one more question from somebody? Yes, sir.
I have one question. You started out by talking about how one of the reasons we miss the dark matter is because we are so limited by light. That is, we depend on light.
Yeah, well, that's the only way we can see it.
But given that dark matter is expanding as it is...
Well, wait, no. The dark matter is actually clumping. It's attractive. So dark matter, like the galactic halo, is a stable ball. It's a dark energy that's repulsive.
The dark energy.
Yeah.
But the point is one of the points you were making is that light has a maximum speed.
Yes.
Does dark energy have a maximum speed?
Well, I don't know what that means. So I don't know operational.
Can it exceed the speed of light?
No. I don't think. No. Because what we have, like the globular, the galactic halo. The galactic halo is a stable kind of sphere of this stuff. And actually, I can tell you what it is. What it is, in quantum field theory, in quantum field theory, we have two kinds of particles. We have what are called virtual particles, which are inside the vacuum state, and we have real particles, which are excited states. So you can show pretty easily, and this is my theory, that what are called virtual electron-positron pairs, virtual quark-antiquark pairs, they will all act as dark matter. They will cause, through Einstein's theory of gravity, what's called the equivalence principle, and just what called quantum statistics, standard, pretty simple physics actually, textbook physics. You can show that these virtual particles inside the vacuum that are spin 1/2, what are fermions, they obey Fermi-Dirac statistics, those will act exactly as dark matter. They're going to generate attractive gravity. Okay, and then the dark energy are like light itself, virtual photons, what we call virtual bosons, spin 1 particles. They have the opposite effect. They create the anti-gravity. So it's actually pretty simple, and it's not. It's all everything's quantum field theory, and quantum field theory is based on causality. That classically nothing goes faster than the speed of light. That doesn't mean that we can't make spaceships that go faster than light, because that's a whole other thing. It's called warp drive, and in a warp drive, you have like this bubble, and what's happening, see, all that matters, the speed of light limitation is when you have something that is like a particle that's moving through space, through a fixed space-time. Space-time is like rigid, like what's called Minkowski space-time. But when the space-time is non-rigid, and when there's gravitational fields, gravity is curvature, it's like a curving of space-time, and that's dynamic. It's a dynamic field, just like electromagnetic fields. And if you can control the curvature, you can, the way the warp drive works, like when Star Trek Enterprise goes into warp, what's happening is that there's dark energy, space is expanding at the stern of the starship, space, so it's surfing, it's just like a surfer on a wave. The space is expanding. The ship itself isn't moving locally, it's just like it's sitting there. There's no G-flow, it's like you're floating in space. See? And so the space behind the ship is expanding, and the space in front of the ship is contracting. Okay, and because of that, there's no violation of relativity, because locally everything looks like special relativity, but from a global point of view, guys far away outside, it looks like the thing actually has gone. It can go, from one end of the universe to the other. There's maybe a billion light years in a couple of minutes of shipboard time. And you don't even have to worry about time dilation, it turns out. It can literally go outside faster than light, but it's a very tricky effect. It's hard to explain, but that's standard physics. I mean, people are working on that. But the thing is now, how do we actually do it? How can we do it? See, and that's the trick. And that's where the whole UFOs, the flying saucer stuff comes in. That's a whole other kettle of fish.